So today I'm going to be reviewing Cowboy Bebop, the live action Netflix series. This is going to be rough. Not long ago I reviewed a film called The Many Saints of Newark, which is of course a prequel of sorts, not really, but sort of, to The Sopranos. And I did that review from the point of view of a diehard Sopranos fan, of course. And naturally, I kind of ripped into it, as a Sopranos fan would. Well, Many Saints of Newark is a fucking masterpiece compared to this live-action version of Cowboy Bebop. But much like my Many Saints of Newark review, I am approaching this Cowboy Bebop show from the point of view of a diehard fan of the original show, the original Cowboy Bebop anime. I have been a huge fan of it ever since I was a teenager. It's one of my favorite shows of all time, and I would desperately hope that you are coming to this live action version having seen the original, at least maybe a few episodes. Because if you've seen the original show, I would think, again, I can only speak to my own experience, but I would think it would be very difficult to get through even just 5 minutes of this, and you just think to yourself, wow, this is such a misfire. I want to go and watch the original instead. Really, that's the only reason I think you would watch this in any capacity. Now, in this review that I'm talking about for the live action version, I have only seen about 2.5 episodes. I've not seen the whole thing, so I am coming at it just from an initial impression of how the first few episodes struck me. Again, it might get better, it might get worse, I have no idea. But that really doesn't change that much because, I'm still coming at it from the same point of view. I am one of those people that have thought from the very beginning. I know they've been trying to make a live action version of Cowboy Bebop. Seriously, for years and years and years. I know Keanu Reeves was attached to it at a certain point. I have always been personally against any sort of live action interpretation of this particular anime, just because I don't know, it seems so obvious to me that it would never work. It would never, ever work. The only way I can see it working, just maybe, and I mean maybe, is if you had somebody extraordinary, an extraordinary cinematic type of, a director who is very cinematic, who has like a Blade Runner type of point of view and a huge budget. Just bloated over the top. It's the only way something like this could even potentially work. But what's so special about it is how settled everyone is into these worlds. It is no longer something where you're wide-eyed and innocent. Wow, look at this. They've lived it. Every new amazing location in the show, there is just like an old and worn feeling to it. And there's this weight of time that you constantly feel every single moment. It's like just a shadow lurking over the entire thing. When I was a teenager, I was becoming a cinephile, the cinephile I would eventually become. And so a show like this, the original, was a wet dream to me because it had everything. Clearly these people knew and respected the genres that they were pulling from. They know them so well. It is a true pastiche that is full of all of these witty, pulpy sort of elements, with that touch of the eccentric and the extemporaneous. Every inch of the frame is always interesting. Every shot means something, or seems like it means something, but there is still a key to it, and I think a lot of people miss this when they first watch the show, myself included. First time I saw the show, I found myself thinking, wow, this is so stylistically interesting. It's one of the most stylistically interesting shows I have ever seen, and yet I found myself thinking that there was something missing from the meat of the story, just from the ensemble itself. But as I got older, I realized all of that is fully intentional and all of it really works perfectly. Like, I can't see it being done much differently, just because I think the show is meant to be very empty. It's supposed to give you that empty feeling. Bebop on the surface is very much a stylistic, cool sort of pastiche, but to me, the show has a lot more depth to it, and you realize that because it's always underlying. To me, this is a show about human beings that have an inability to connect, hence why the relationships feel ultimately unsatisfying. This is about people just completely unable to live in the present. And if they are living in the present, they're simultaneously living in the past. They cannot connect to anyone, not just the ensemble around them, but just the people that they meet in their lives. Every episode, they meet someone for a little bit and then they go away forever. And they cannot connect to anyone. You're seeing all of these stories kind of peripherally, but you're always focused on your own narrative and your past, how it haunts you and how so desperately you are seeking a definitive arc And, instead of paying attention to what is going on around you. This is about people who live together, but it's not like an episode of Friends or something like that. They tolerate each other. Yes, they do have a bit of affection for each other deep down, but none of it is ever fully realized. Everyone is out for themselves. And the moment that, any of them is faced with any sort of adversity, they just throw the rest of the crew under the bus. It's just survival of the fittest. And I always felt that was really realistic. When I watch this show, it feels like I'm on a great road trip where I just go from town to town and meet all these interesting people. By little, I feel more and more isolated and reflecting on my life and mortality. And there's always that existential dread that is weighing on them, especially with the main character, Spike Spiegel. And of course, they're dealing with it in the way that they color their world. But to me, like the jazz and the genre bending and all of that, to me, it's less fun. It's more melancholy the more that you watch the show. It reflects this strange emptiness within the soul. And we're grasping at all of these sorts of things to fill that void. Characters smoking cigarettes, don't they seem so noir and cool? No, they're killing themselves. How do you capture that with a show that is meant to be this sort of epic sci-fi action sort of adventure? All of those typical archetypes, and yet these characters are aimless. They have no sort of purpose. And that density has to be felt even in the midst of things that are supposed to feel just like little vignettes. It's the irony in those contradictory things that I think is what makes the show so special for me. And the way each episode, it's like you go into a horror movie with Toys in the Attic, or you go into like this interesting noir with Black Dog Serenade. You go into spaghetti western with Cowboy Funk. It's like each one is a new outfit for the day. And you have like a new song to listen to carry you throughout your day. Like coping mechanisms, but also they inform the richness of your world. It is your sense of self-expression. And I don't ever see this as melancholy in a really dismal way, which would be very obvious and easy route to go. But it's full of creativity and humor. To take a show and basically mimic everything from the original just is naturally counterintuitive, because it's naturally going to be very hard to create that serendipitous quality. And so I just think it's wrong from every single angle. There is not one thing about this, like I said, that works. Bebop is jazz. Bebop is incidental. Bebop is improvisational. It's an old guy in a New Orleans cafe, and that jazz is in his blood. It's in the sweat. It's in the grit of everything. This is elevator jazz. Honestly, I think elevator jazz might be better than this. This feels like kind of like a cheap indie movie made by like a lot of excessive fans of Cowboy Bebop. And I don't want to be too mean on it, because I do believe that even when things are really, really terrible, a lot of work went into it. A lot of people worked a lot of hours in order to make it work. And so naturally, I always have that in mind when I discuss something, because I do get a sense that the people who worked on this do love it. They're just coming at it in a way that I think is just really misguided, because I feel like a true fan of this would have the restraint to say, no, don't touch it. Leave it as it is. Just because you can does not mean you should. And that's one of the big problems we have in this day and age, of course. But it's like all the great works, whether it's like Akira or Princess Mononoke, Cowboy Bebop, just don't touch them. They're very epic in scope and style, and they work brilliantly for animation for a reason. These ideas lend themselves to animation so perfectly because you can stretch the logic. You can make things seem more exaggerated than normal. It's a place where like sci-fi and blaxploitation, film noir, screwball comedy can all exist in a homogeneous way where it's actually believable. You can believe in some jarring tonal shifts. It's convincing. It pops with all this color. It's naturally going to be a little bit more abstract. And that's the point. Cowboy Bebop should have an abstract, dreamy sort of feeling. You lose almost all of that with live action. You just do. Even if you have an amazing budget, you're going to lose it. Anytime I see something that is animated, that they turn into live action, there's just a muddled quality to it compared to how it might have looked in like a great animated version of it. That's why partially when I see superhero movies, I tend to always be drawn more to like the animated versions of them. Like, I liked Into the Spider-Verse. That I thought was very cool. Or even just like, Batman the Animated Series. Because again, I feel there's something about that live action that drains a lot of the life and the poetry out of what's so colorful and powerful about the animation. Bebop depends also greatly on the details. That is what kind of creates the mood so well. And the opening of this first episode here is a tribute of sorts to the Bebop film. That opening, I think it's like 5 minutes where they go into the store and there's that whole robbery. And I liked that opening a lot. I'm not a huge fan of the movie overall, but I did like that opening. But here, Yeah, I mean, it felt bad. It felt like a bunch of cosplayers trying to reenact something that they love. An indie project, as I said, that is made by fanboys, which, again, I admire the passion, but this isn't an indie project. This is Cowboy Bebop. People love it, and this is Netflix. Shame on you, Netflix. The lighting is so artificial, and they're going for this very kitschy sort of look because, naturally they're having to strip things down a little bit. And that's all, like, I understand that for sure, but it's just done in a way that's just so poor. And they think that, by doing a few Dutch angles and quick cuts, we can create the sort of spirit of Bebop. It's like, no, that is very Director 101, basic, obvious choices. They do use the original Yoko Kanno music, or they use a lot of it sprinkled throughout, and I think they would have to do that because it is so coveted for the fans. And yes, I love the music. The music is some of the best music ever used in an anime show, if not the absolute best. It is a spectacular fusion of all kinds of different styles that, to me, add up to much more than just the background music. It's the playlist of life for these characters, and it serves as a much deeper metaphor, I think. But because this version feels like such by-the-book generic type of schlock that is trying desperately to copy something, you listen to the music in the background and it feels ironically out of place. You're like, wow, this music is great and it's so unique. Why is it here? Now, again, I only saw the first 2-3 episodes, so I can only talk about how the narrative is built through that. But I can tell just initially that, it's going to be less episodic, less the vignette style, which again, all the music, the genre, all of that is what makes it very special. All of that is very intentional. They seem to be kind of having a thread of the vicious storyline, which is the core story, and it's kind of building throughout in a way that feels, just like a typical TV show. I always love the episodic nature because I think it's very hard to pull off in the way that they do. The pathos builds in a maybe less literal way than you would normally expect. Each episode is like a new record on a record player. It should have that feeling of walking out the door, headphones in your ears. It has that sense of ease and authenticity, and rather than just a pure recreation of something. And then it comes to the actual cast and the acting, and again, it all just kind of fits together. John Cho is not a bad actor. But, again, like, who could play Spike Spiegel? Who in the world could possibly pull that off? I mean, I think that with him, he's playing Spike, but he's not Spike. He's nowhere near as cool. I feel like Spike is just too well drawn to be played by anyone. He so works in an animated sort of way. He's mythical. You've got to capture the sense of humor with him. Almost that like stoner sense of like, I don't care, oblivious, but yet also very badass, always having that aching sort of melancholy that I mentioned, that loneliness, also that ruggedness. There's a lot going on there. It's very much a postmodern sort of protagonist. I almost imagine, this is weird, this may be a weird thing, but when I look at Sean O'Malley, the UFC fighter, he gives me a Spike vibe. I don't think he could play Spike. I don't think he's as cool as Spike, but yeah, he's got something a little eccentric about him. He's got that jazz in him. He's fun. He's interesting. But he also has that stoner sort of, out of the box quality, and you've got to be out of the box. And here, again, they're trying to be so faithful, and I think what makes remakes or, adaptations interesting is how you can put your own spin on it. And I think this desperately needed that in order to feel some sort of authenticity. And it's the same, like, the rest of the cast, it's like bad cosplay. You have Jet, who sounds almost exactly like the one in the show, but, it doesn't matter. And yet it's missing something. And Faye, I just felt was a complete misfire in terms of casting and performance. The transitions, just everything, it never felt comfortable. And yes, maybe it is because it's just the first few episodes. Naturally, those are going to be harder to kind of settle into something. But with this one, it was just so off the mark. It completely missed the point, I think, of all of those pastiche elements and how to bring them together in an effortless way. And what I find very interesting about this is that, naturally, Cowboy Bebop, they put the original show on Netflix for people to watch. It's a good marketing decision. It's like, hey, I'll watch this and then watch the new show when it comes out. But it's also a very strange decision because it's like, why would you put the original and then put this on there? Because no one is going to watch this. Or I would think maybe watch a little bit of it and go, wow, this is bad. I'm just going to go over and watch the original. Really, all the, putting the original on there is just going to deter people. At least that's how it seems to me. Yeah, I just feel like there's absolutely no reason for this. It's ridiculous, it's pointless, it's silly, and it just, I don't know, it left a gross feeling in my body and in my mind, and it just made me desperately want to watch the original. And I have been, and I love it. So if you've never seen Cowboy Bebop, please do not watch this. watch the original. It's right there. It's right there on the choices, on the search on Netflix. Please, just watch it. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me as well. My email is in the description box below. Also, I want to give a shout out to my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link to support that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.